Season 3, Episode 8 of House of the Dragon. The season finale, on balance, was one of the better episodes of the season. It was mostly decent, with only a few things that leave me scratching my head a bit. One thing I will say is I'm starting to see the bigger picture with some of Ryan Condal's changes from the book, and how they're going to loop back around next season into the endgame, and how this puzzle fits back together, albeit with tape and glue. Does this mean I like the changes? No, but I get how it's going to work. Now, before we get into this review proper, I want to touch upon George R. R. Martin and toxic butterflies. A few weeks ago, in another review, we talked about how his infamous blog post criticising Ryan Condal and some of the changes made from the book, mainly the lack of Maelor and Helena's death. He disowned the show as no longer his story. The reason I bring this up now is because in that review I suggested that we may actually be seeing the impact of George's comments on screen. One of the standout elements of that blog was his comments that in the show, Helaena would die simply for no reason, that there would be no fresh horror or incident. Now, we have now seen that event. I can't honestly say that George's comments reflect the reality of it. If anything, the show spent a lot of time this season not just foreshadowing Helena's death, but setting up her motives around it. Was it more janky without Maelor and Bitterbridge? Yeah, but they did give her cause. Alicent's protests about her being locked up, her troubled mental state with the dreams, the pregnancy, the visions last week, which I think play a huge role in her choosing to take her own life. I believe through her dreams and seeing them come true, she saw there was no way out. There was no happy ending on a farm with her chickens. She'd been stripped of all agency. So I can't say that in the show, she kills herself for no reason as George suggests. She clearly had a motive and reasons to do so. While I still do prefer the book version and the mystery of why Helaena in the book versus the show is very different. What we did get works for her when you consider the lack of Maelor, the lack of Bitterbridge, and a very different blood and cheese. So here is the issue. I've backed George in his comments strongly in the past, but in that Toxic Butterflies blog post, his stance on Helaena misses that mark. I think one of two things has happened. After the blog, Ryan Condal did take some of the criticisms to heart and did adjust the scripts a bit to appease George. Or this was in fact always Ryan Condal's plan, and George might just be wrong. Well, those are the two stances I've seen online discussed this week, but I don't think it's actually that black and white. I think it's very possible that Ryan Condal did make changes. I also think what is more likely is that it's possible that George just didn't have the full picture and was commenting on outlines or early drafts of scripts. I do still think George is right to be aggrieved by the way his story is being told. But on this Helaena point, well, I'm baffled. I'm edging towards they made the changes after the blog post. I really enjoyed the opening scene of Rhaenyra learning that Aegon is alive. It's arguably Emma Darcy's most convincing performance of the season, more so than even Jace's death. I'm not wholly sure why she's so surprised. She knew he was alive. I guess it's the sunfire aspect of it. It's interesting she goes running right to Daemon for comfort, when last week it seemed like she'd lost all faith in him. Daemon really is the instigator for a lot of her actions. His speech about answering to higher gods certainly influences Rhaenyra's crazy moves later in the episode. What Daemon has given her with his idea of not being beholden to the Seven is a loophole in her lack of high septum blessing. I think she goes to Daemon because she subconsciously knows he'll tell her something she wants to hear in that moment of despair. In terms of writing, does it make 100% sense? No, but the performance really sells it, and it fits within the context of the episode, if not the wider story. It seems that the episode theme is people calling Rhaenyra out for her bullshit. Baelor hits the nail on the head. Rhaenyra uses people when it suits her, but abandons them when they need her. I'm guessing this moment is going to be key in the setup to Baelor's Season 4 arc, depending on how the dragonseed plot is handled, and of course, Corlys, whom does now seem to be open to peace. After all, Daemon did call him his prisoner, which is something a lot of people seem to have overlooked. Another running theme this week is Rhaenyra coming across as extremely condescending as she gets more and more confident in her own hype, having this huge delusion of grandeur, of being chosen by the gods. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to be seeing some shades of book Rhaenyra, but I just wish they'd ramped it up more subtly over the season. There were of course moments throughout the season, but it just seems all of a sudden this Aegon news has tipped her over the edge. Speaking of delusions of grandeur, Alan is certainly letting the power he now has go to his head, which low-key fits well with what happens with his book character. Without spoilers, I'm just going to say Helaena Targaryen, Alejandra Martell. If you know, you know. I'm seeing how this Alan becomes book Alan. Daeron's knighting was a bit, well, odd. Look, I have really enjoyed what they have done with Ormund Hightower. It's one of the better changes they made from the book this season. But Daeron, it's a real shame they didn't give him more to do. I think the lack of Honeywine and Bitterbridge didn't leave much for the character to really work with. I'm not sure why they even bothered with the Daeron the Daring part in the show. He's not really done anything noteworthy at all. I have a really strong feeling that Ryan Condal never actually wanted to include Daeron. It makes no sense that they are doing it in season 3 this late into the show. If they were going to do it, they should have just done it last season where the timeline kind of made more sense. I have a feeling this may have been more of the notes given to Ryan Condal by HBO, given the sheer amount of fan backlash and expectation for the character. I 100% am convinced Condal's original plan included no Daeron and a much more straightforward Tumbleton arc. I did love this little scene here with Ulf. It kind of seems like Rhaenyra may have had a point, even if it was delivered harshly. I think this is the closest to Book Ulf that we've gotten, and it's 100% the kind of character I pictured in my head while reading. I did not expect the sacking of Mysaria, but I guess it makes sense. Rhaenyra was being pulled between both her and Daemon. Don't get me wrong, it comes across as an utter 360 from sleeping with her last week, but I guess given the Aegon situation, Rhaenyra has had a change of perspective. I will say this, I am surprised they did this now. I was sure after last week, between Rhaenyra and Daemon's lies, and, well, Rhaenyra sleeping with Mysaria, these were going to be the wedges that get driven into Daemon and Rhaenyra's relationship, as per the book arc. But I guess not. We're kind of back to the status quo between them, which in all makes the choice of having the Rhaenyra and Mysaria sex scene last week even more baffling. This shot of Helaena crying in the Godswood is heartbreaking. That really was her favourite place, her calm, and to be limited to 1 hour per week must have been hell for her. Now we see here one of her visions from last week coming to pass, which suggests that while some of her visions do come true, some, like her vision of her and her children on the farm, might just be things that could happen. But you see this look of dread as she knows that in her mind her fate has already been ordained. With Mysaria's warning about Rhaenyra and Helena's babe, I think is one of the two things to happen this week to push her over the edge. She really cannot see a way out, and her life looks so bleak. She feels like she's fighting fate herself and losing. I loved this Alys and Aemond scene. What a lore drop. I was questioning her motives this season with Aemond, and the idea that she's just manipulating him. But I am starting to believe there is some genuine feeling and emotion there. Now, the Harren the Black thing is interesting. A big question here is this something that came from George, or is this a show thing? I don't really mind either way in truth. It makes a lot of the more magical stuff around Alys in the books make a lot more sense, and low-key does give some more credence to the tinfoil house went theory I love so much. The show is vague enough that her exact relationship with Harren is not 100% clear. The dialogue either points to her being a wife, or perhaps a daughter, or even a granddaughter potentially. Any of these ideas would work, with the idea of her son being the last male of Harren's line. But the way she talked about Harrenhal, her connection and right to it, low-key for me at least fits with her being a daughter or a granddaughter of Harren, rather than a wife. But I love the idea of her being cursed to live, that she likely went to the Green Men for help to save her burned son, that there's real magic tying her to Harrenhal. Don't get me wrong, I love the book idea that she could be a bastard of House Strong, maybe Lionel's daughter or sister, and the irony of her relationship with Aemond, the #1 strong and bastard hater. But I really don't hate this Harren idea. I do wonder if they will reference this in the Aegon Conquest movie in development. Maybe something as simple as an Alys cameo. The Helaena-Rhaenyra scene was also great, with Fiasaban giving a hell of a performance this week in general. I think so many people have misrepresented what Helaena means by ugly. She's not physically talking about aesthetics. The politics of the Red Keep is ugly. The politics of the Iron Throne is ugly. The politics of court is ugly, and makes people themselves ugly morally. It's more of a statement about how power corrupts than anything else. I also agree with her comments about Viserys hating what Rhaenyra has done. To a degree. I think Viserys would have been horrified at what his whole family has done. The amount of death and murder. And yeah, I do think he would have been disappointed. Once again, we see this condescending and arrogant Rhaenyra, who's hearing what Helaena is saying but not listening to it. Helaena knows the truth of the situation now, not just from her dreams, but from Mysaria. Rhaenyra's reaction alone at the idea the babe could be a boy tells Helaena everything. Then we get the final nail in the coffin for her. She's already on edge. Force-feeding her food pushes her over that edge. It's not just the force-feeding that's the issue, but it just confirms to her that she is in fact powerless, helpless, and at the mercy of Rhaenyra. The act of force-feeding her while under the guise of helping her and her babe is just stripping away that last piece of agency she has left, to the point where, to Helaena, the idea of taking her own life, which is clearly something she dreamed of, is the last fragment of free will she has left. Which, as I said in the opening, does baffle me in terms of George's blog and his comments about Helaena, and why I'm sure he must have seen an early outline, or maybe they changed the story after the blog post, because Helaena certainly has reason. Not gonna lie, I don't love Rhaenyra's Renaissance Fair cosplay look, with the moody eyeshadow. And clearly, someone in the costume department doesn't understand how chainmail actually works and how it's supposed to be worn in this circumstance. While I dislike the look, it does make sense Rhaenyra would do something like this to try and project what she sees as masculine power, thinking that in turn would give her more legitimacy in the eyes of onlookers. But I think she really misses the mark with it, and again is caught up in her own power trip, rather than thinking logically about the situation. The very fact she's doing a coronation speaks to that more than anything else. You know what? I don't mind them switching up Tumbleton, with the Greens defending and the Blacks attacking. There are some things which are practically harder, like it makes more sense Roddy the Ruin sallying out of Tumbleton to kill Ormund than what we get in the show. Still, I don't know how I feel about Daemon being here. I think it only works if he's attacking, effectively using Caraxes to break the siege. It is kind of odd Ormund isn't telling Daeron or Gwaine about his master plan. If they know what's going on, Gwaine isn't going to go rogue. To me, this reeks of plot convenience rather than anything actually logical. But I do love the fact that Ulf is just MIA, and I guess kind of proves Rhaenyra's point. Gwaine's plan is never going to work, and proves he doesn't know or understand Daemon Targaryen. But I think this is one of the most important scenes in this episode in terms of Season 4. We see that Corlys is open to peace, even if it's not the kind of peace that Daemon or Gwaine is after. Daemon's reaction is key. He berates Corlys for it, and refers to him as a prisoner. If you've ever read the book, then you know where Corlys' arc is going. I think this scene is going to be the genesis of that. Every Aegon scene has been a joy this season, even this one. It's clear that Aemond is repentant, and Aegon is smart enough to know he needs Aemond and Rhaegar. My question is, where are they going to go, and how does this fit into their book arc? Aegon's plan is to go to Tumbleton with Aemond, which is very, very off-book if it does indeed happen. I don't know why, but it's possible we are not going to get Aegon's Dragonstone arc next season, and they could rework it into King's Landing as a location. But again, there's so much of the endgame that hinges around it being on Dragonstone to work. I'm thinking if we get this Tumbleton trip, it will be more of a side quest for both of them next season, while we wait for Dragonstone and the God's Eye. What's interesting here is Aemond calls Alys his betrothed, which, if it's true, could have some real implications with some of the Alys theories, given where she's at the end of the story. It's nice that we actually got to see the real Roddy the Ruin this week. I was a bit disappointed with his character up till now. I think we finally actually saw what I think a lot of book fans were expecting. We also got a Garibaldi Grey name drop, but nothing with Unwin Peak. Is it mad to hope we might actually get him next season, given how important he is to the endgame? For me, Black Aly has been such a disappointment. Effectively a background extra. The whole edgy makeup and attitude just didn't work for me. She's had, 3 lines all season? And frankly, they might as well have not have bothered to include her, when she's just a glorified background extra. We're clearly not going to get her core plot, her relationship with Sabbatha Frey, Bloody Ben, then of course her role in the Hour of the Wolf. I don't think they have time next season to give her enough character to really make it matter at all. So Rhaenyra's whole plan of a coronation was batshit crazy to begin with. She knows the High Septon was resistant before. Now that Aegon is known to be alive, there is no chance. It's clear she has channeled her inner Daemon and his attitude towards the faith. But doing what she's done here is the single most brain-dead thing you could have ever have done. Targaryen or not, there is one thing that the history of Westeros shows us consistently. You do not fuck with the faith. Yeah, you have dragons. So did King Aenys, and the faith almost brought down House Targaryen with the uprising. They were a constant and persistent thorn in the side of Maegor the Cruel, and it took King Jaehaerys coming up with a doctrine of exemptionalism to restore a working relationship with the faith and allow the House Targaryen to carry on being the incestuous dragon lords we all know. You work with the faith. The crown and the faith go hand in hand, 2 sides of the same coin. What Rhaenyra has just effectively done is killed the Westeros Pope, and there will be consequences for that. I think if we're going to get the Moon of Madness, it will be focused solely on the religious aspect, with some kind of shepherd-like figure. This one action has enforced the idea of Maegor with teats. There is no coming back. The small folk were already fragile. This will be the final blow. I think what we see here is her god complex kicking in. That because she is Rhaenyra, the chosen one, she is above the laws that bind everyone else. But like I said, the best Targaryen kings all knew not to fuck with the faith. Look, I'm glad we're finally getting a glimpse of Book Rhaenyra. That after 3 seasons we've finally gotten to Rhaenyra the Cruel. It just seems 2 seasons too late. The writers spent so long in season 2 and 3 deflecting any responsibility from Rhaenyra that now she's fallen off the deep end. It feels a little bit rushed, given they've only really pushed it heavily during the back half of this season, with a few glimpses here and there before that. Now, I've seen some posts on Twitter and Reddit in the last few weeks from interviews with Emma Darcy. The short version is a lot of people have started to believe, from her answers in these interviews, that Darcy doesn't actually like the book character of Rhaenyra, and frankly never wanted to play her that way. Hence why so much of who Rhaenyra is has been changed to reflect Emma Darcy's version of the character. I think if you don't want to play a character as written, you shouldn't try and create your own, because that's when we start to get a disconnect between what the actor is doing with the character and what the story demands of the character. Now, I don't know how much of that is true, and how much of that is people reading too much into short interviews. But I like Emma as Rhaenyra. I think they've done a really decent job with what they've been given to work with. But it's just a shame they waited so long to pull the trigger on this more unhinged Rhaenyra, because Emma plays it so well. Her speech was so unsettling in a good way. She comes across as utterly crazy to anyone that isn't Rhaenyra. The small folk don't have a clue what she's talking about. Her own small council doesn't have a clue what she's talking about. The speech was for Rhaenyra to convince herself she is in the right, that she is Rhaenyra the Chosen, not for the small folk or anyone else. It was her feeding her own delusions of grandeur. The fact that she slips into High Valyrian that no one there understands speaks volumes. One thing you do get when you cast Matt Smith in any show is his ability to deliver a rousing speech. See, my personal issue with Matt as Daemon Targaryen is I can't quite separate him from being the 11th Doctor in my mind. For me, That's always going to be the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of him, and scenes like this just remind me of him as the Doctor so much. The same applies for a lot of the actors who've been in Doctor Who actually, which is why I think casting unknown actors can actually be a benefit sometimes, because people aren't going to come in with a preconceived notion of the character. But for Matt Smith, it does just seem to be his big speeches that cause it, given that his Doctor was prone to doing that. I do have one minor nitpick with the way the show has done the Winter Wolves. Why do they all have Stark banners? The Riverlords all have their own, not just House Tully. Hell, we've even seen the likes of House Vance, which is quite a deep cut. So why, when it comes to the North, is it always just House Stark by default? There will be men from all the other houses there. I mean, Roddy is the Lord of Barrington, the Lord of House Dustin, so why has he not at least not got his own banner? Yes, Cregan Stark sent them, but still, I want my Northern heraldry. The Riverlands gets it, so should the North. Oh, and before I forget, Ormund using the kids as human shields is absolutely diabolical, and 100% something we've established his character would do. For the most part, the actual action in the battle is fine. The Winter Wolves really get their time to shine. They do, however, make the concept of the attack a sieged town look easy, when if anything it should have been the other way around. The Winter Wolves should have had a horrid time. Overall, I think the Battle at Tumbleton was okay. It's exactly what you've come to expect from House of the Dragon. It's entertaining. Just don't think about the details or logic of it too much. But one thing we learned from Game of Thrones is even the dumbest battles, like the Battle of the Bastards, can still be entertaining, even if it makes no sense whatsoever. TV magic after all. I find the fact Daemon and Ormund have both lost of hilarious, both seething with anger, and both coming from men who think very little of Ulf in general, effectively causing him to go rogue like this. I found how Daemon deals with the kids at the gate very interesting. You can tell he's listened to Rhaenyra. He's not just going to up and burn them. But at the same time, he can't just stand there forever, hence why those last two kids become charcoal. You can tell Daemon is just frustrated with this entire situation. This feeds into why Daemon enters the town on horseback. You can't just burn the whole of Tumbleton due to the sheer amount of collateral damage, hence why he needs to be more precise, thus why he has to go in on horseback. Yeah, it makes it harder, but without the collateral. So while I actually get why some people felt Daemon doing this was just aura farming, and he should have just stayed on Caraxes, in the context of the story, it does actually make more sense than it first seems, once you break it down. It's just a shame that Daeron does so little in the battle. It would have been nice if he was actually an active part in it, but I did enjoy the small moment between him and Gwaine. It really gets across the fact that Gwaine's been the true father figure for Daeron. I also love the subtle reference to Kristen Cole. I'm incredibly intrigued what they're going to do with Gwaine and Daeron next season. We of course have Ulf's obvious turn, which is surprising no one. I think the really important part of this scene is actually Corlys' reaction. We know he's become jaded by Rhaenyra. We know he's open to peace. And I think witnessing Ulf turn on the Blacks and the Greens in Tumbleton will make his position even clearer. Bear in mind that Daemon views him as a prisoner at this point, so I think we really are seeing the making of Corlys' book arc in season 4. Given that, however, and the context of why he reached this point is different in the show, how is that going to impact Adam and Alan's arc? I was not expecting a showdown between Jon Roxton and Daemon, but I did really enjoy it. Roxton really did have Daemon on the ropes for most of that fight, and for a brief moment I actually thought maybe, just maybe, Daemon might be toast, and they're just gonna go completely ham off book now. But the logical part of my mind always said, no. We know Daemon has the thickest plot armor of all. I was surprised as well, Jon Roxton actually made it out alive. I guess he does actually have quite an important role in season 4. And I have a feeling he potentially, if we don't get Unwin Peak, could get some of his role. I do wonder if we might be getting a Horrors of War arc for Daemon, given his final scene in Tumbleton, where what he witnessed does seem to have an impact on him. Could this be why he chooses the path towards the God's Eye, in an attempt to end the war in season 4? I'm still confused how they are handling Hugh Hammer. Has he turned? Has he not? Who's he going to blame for his wife's death? I guess Daemon thinks he's also turned. I do think Hugh's arc this season has been a bit of a mess, and the intent really isn't clear. The episode ends with Helena's death, and I'm surprised we didn't actually see her jump. but the shot of her impaled on the spikes within the dry moat was just as powerful. It's sad. I really did enjoy what the show did with Helaena. I think I've spoken about her enough in this video, but I will just add this. I am a little disappointed we never got Daemon talking with her in her weirwood visions is never addressed. I was 100% expecting a scene this season where he confronts her about it, or at the very least tells Rhaenyra, which could have been connected with her finding out she is a dreamer. It's almost like the writers just forgot this happened in season 2, which just highlights how inconsequential Daemon's whole arc was last season. Rhaenyra looks truly unhinged in this final scene, and I do love it, just how cold she is. I think her seeing that tapestry of her on the throne has convinced her even more she's doing the right thing without knowing the true context of what it truly means. It was a good place to end the season, even if they've left so much that they need to cover in the last 8 episodes of the show. Either the pace of season 4 is going to be rapid, or there will be some major cuts. Did I enjoy this episode? Yes. Was it the best episode of the show? No. The battle was fun if you don't think about it too much, and I like the fact we're seeing shades of book Rhaenyra at last. I think I've made it a running theme in my reviews that this season for me is comparable to season 6 of Game of Thrones in quality. It's not exactly peak Game of Thrones, but for the most part it's an enjoyable watch. Don't get me wrong, the writing is an absolute mess in a lot of ways, being carried heavily by some top-notch acting and directing. Like season 6 of Game of Thrones, this season the House of the Dragon wasn't bad, nor good, it was okay. I'll be making a season review next week, but I think with some distance from the early episodes, and now knowing the full context of the season, some of my views may have changed. I'd give this episode a 7 out of 10. Tumbleton was fine. I enjoyed Helaena, and I'm glad we're getting shades of book Rhaenyra at the same time. It's really hard to ignore the questionable writing and some of the more baffling decisions, but honestly, the episode was better than I thought it was going to be. Going in, I was 100% expecting to be a car crash of an episode, so I guess just being okay is actually a good thing in this context.